Hello and welcome to Practical Intuition with Kay. This is, I can't believe this, episode 399 of this show. And I'm super excited because I have a really fun and special person with us today. We're going to be getting an hour with Coach Andrew Moss. Andrew is someone who helps people. You have said it so beautifully. Something like come into our purest and most loving selves. And I know that you've been very helpful for me with that, and I know that you help a lot of people kind of do that. And I'm really excited to welcome you onto the show. Thank you for being here, Coach Andrew Moss.
Well, thank you, Kay. I appreciate that. That's interesting to hear those words back from somebody else, because it's one of those things you get asked, what do you do, all the time? And I think I have a different answer every time. So it's always cool to
Oh,
hear
that's so, what
something that stuck.
something that's stuck. Yeah. Well, in reflecting on coming into this conversation, I got to thinking about what what has this been like for me to be, in a kind of coaching partnership with you. And as your client, that's really like it's helped me to sort of clear away the static of all the stories and fears and things like that. And really, I do pretty much feel like I am the purest and most loving version of myself now. And, it's a lot of fun.
Mhm. Yeah. And, I think it takes a lot of different forms for people, but, what that looks like when people find that sort of alignment with self, and that trust in self, and that love of self and belief in self. Um, boy, it's like, it's part of my sort of origin story of coaching, of sort of reminding myself of a past version of myself before all the layers of adulthood started getting in the way.
Hmm.
It's like that's kind of going back to find that again, that sort of natural state that we were in when we were young and carefree, and weren't worried about what life looked like and what we looked like, and any of that stuff. There's a few years, right, where that's sort of those golden years of childhood, where we get to really just enjoy and express ourselves in that way. And
Yep.
so yeah, well, it's been fun to be part of your journey, and to see that emerge, and then to witness all the feedback that you're getting about the way you're showing up in the world has been really beautiful to see.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. So that has me instantly curious, though. If I were to ask you that question today, what's your coaching about? When someone works with you, what are you working to help them create or do?
Yeah, I think it's a very similar to what you said. I think it's trusting their inner self, right? Like
Mm,
like and trusting it is a process. Like actually being able to hear it for a lot of people is sort of the starting point. It's like they get so much going on in their mind and their thoughts, and that they never really hear their inner self and the advice that we would give ourselves, because they're all caught up in other people's business and other people's stories and all kinds of stuff, right? So
mm.
it's a process of getting to the place where you can trust to ask yourself for the advice that you need. And I suspect, like, if I think about what's sort of prevailing conversations I'm part of these days, that's a big part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many messages from the world that we can take in. I think that's how it was for me. I felt like I didn't even know there was a self in here to return to
Hmm.
until I, sort of identified something that I really wanted to reach for, and all the things that came up as I was trying to reach for it really helped me sort of tune that out. And you're awesome at helping somebody do that.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've recognized that through my life. Even when I was young, in the neighborhood, I had, for some reason, my tendency would be to go and kind of get the kids of the neighborhood together and organize and play games and do things. And I was always somebody that was really supportive of other people and empowering. And so yeah, that that fed me as a young person, the feeling of being able to help people. And then I had coaches and teachers that influenced me and made me helped me feel what it felt like to get that kind of support from somebody else. And then I remember thinking, wow, these people get paid to do this. That's pretty cool. Maybe I could, go off and get paid to help people sort of, yeah, connect to that. Obviously when you're starting out in your 20s, you don't necessarily have the words connect to your inner self, but it's like to trust that you have within you this unbelievable potential that if you can just get out of your own way, like it can express itself. And so like that's the 20-year-old version of me would have probably said it more like that.
Mm,
And now it's just it's a little bit more spiritual or a little bit more connected to sort of like this sense of where does inner wisdom or where does that inner self get its intelligence and its wisdom from, is a fascinating conversation you and I have had before.
yeah.
But it's like there's too many times in life where when we can get into a state of that sort of quietness and we can ask for some guidance and we get some guidance and we recognize that that guidance like comes with total belief in ourselves and total care and love for ourselves. And then you think, well, why, how could I not follow this path? Like, how could I not be tapped into this source of wisdom? And so, it's been a journey of my own, I guess, from that sort of rudimentary version as a 20-year-old to now of understanding it more and more for myself. And I
Mm,
think I've said this to you before, like, I only coach people on things that I've gone through myself and have experienced myself and have found some insights on for myself. Um, I used to buy all the self-help books and all the coaching books, and it all got in the way of me actually just learning how to tap into my own understanding.
mm,
And that might be a controversial thing to say, like don't read the books. I think books are fine. Books are great resources to understand how other people see the mind or see potential or performance. But the best source, I think, is yourself and knowing how to tap into that. And so at this stage of my career, it feels like, that's kind of where I'm at. And it's kind of fun to play with it now. I play with it still, for myself every day. And then to be able to be with other people and help them on that journey as well.
yeah. I like it's all really resonating so much. And it makes me one thing it makes me think of is the daily meditation practice that I cultivate these days and how I used to think that meditation I actually injured myself once trying to contort myself into a position that a meditation book told me I ought to do. And like it's so wonderful to know that you can let all that go and meditation can be whatever you want it to be. Um whatever version of removing the static and being truly present now in this moment and connecting to breath and seeing what observing what comes up instead of being caught up in it, like all those things. um Tuning out the messages. I agree with you that like books are great. In fact, what happens for me now a lot is I'll remember something I read in a book years ago and I'll be like, oh, this makes so much sense now because I'm experiencing it through my own lens instead of trying to be in their lens, which is what I used to do all the time,
Mm,
you know.
yeah. It's funny, when I was early in my career, I coached sports, and I had another coach, a fairly new coach, come up to me at a conference once, and he was sharing with me that he had bought this book that had been written by this famous Australian coach, and in that book, the coach had listed like all of the workouts that his elite squad had done, for like a whole season. And this young coach came and said, I copied and we did exactly the workouts that this Australian coach had told us to do. And it didn't work. I was, I remember that conversation thinking, well, of course not, right? Like it was not designed for you to use in this Northern Ontario, Canada town. It was designed for an elite Australian athlete who had their own story, right? And I think the challenge with books and other people's advice is they're based on a different story than ours. They're based on a different journey. They're based on different beliefs and different upbringings. And they can be useful if we understand the context in which they're being written. They're reflecting back somebody's own journey and somebody's learnings along their journey. And you can pick and choose from that if you feel there's relevance. But I remember that conversation and how literally that coach had tried to take a piece of reflection, and that he was surprised that it hadn't worked. And I thought, wow, like I wonder how much of the self-help and the personal development and all of the advice giving, and now we have social media and all the advice giving that goes on. It's like, if people take that stuff literally, most of it's not going to work. It's not going to be your version of it. It's going to be somebody else's version that you're trying to push through your own, being. And, I think a lot of the things that we've done together, but also we do in our coaching community and I do with all my clients, is to find each person's way of doing it, right? Is to find a way to express yourself in your own way, in a way that feels natural and it feels aligned and doesn't have resistance, and still, is structured in a way that it has a probability of achieving an outcome that you're desiring. But, we each should be able to write our own book on what works, but it should be what works for Kay and what works for Andrew. And if people are curious and want to read those books because they think there's something that they might learn in there, great. But I don't think people should take them very literally. I think they should take them as an example of somebody's journey and learning and where they got insights from, and where their sources of inspiration came from. That's all interesting. It gives you some guidance on ways to do that for yourself. But
sorry, go ahead.
No, I think sort of the human experience, there's so much that's the same between people, and yet it's easy to fall into the trap that thinking, well, if it worked for that person, it'll work for me.
Yeah.
And so, the sameness shouldn't be mistaken to mean that you have to be like everybody else or do it like everybody else. It's an invitation to design your way of expressing and realize that everybody else gets to do the same. And, if we want to enjoy that process of creation of our own path, then we also empower other people to do that for themselves, and whether that's our children or the people around us, like giving them the space to create their version, their own book of their journey.
Yeah. And something really specific is coming up for me. I think I've talked about this on the show before. I have in my brain a large catalog of music. And
Yes.
my son has called it the Eternal Jukebox, and I really love that name. And I remember having a conversation with you one time where I was like, man, I wish I had some other talent than this one. And you were like, what? Like, why? It just was such an interesting way to reflect. And like, it allowed me to get out of my own way and embrace what I am good at and what I do love. Cause I genuinely love being able to access all this music whenever I want. I mean, I love it. And it makes me curious if there was a moment or a piece of this that happened for you where you were like, man, I don't know if this is true, but was there ever a moment where you were like, boy, I wish I could do what that person was doing that way? And then I don't know, like, yeah. Does that make any sense? Even that question?
Yeah. I understand the question. Yeah. Can I just, before we go there, and I will go there, I'm
Okay.
curious about, because the jukebox, I remember that conversation, and I've witnessed your ability to pull lyrics from
In there.
wherever, right? Yes.
Yeah.
But I've also experienced that I think it's a little even broader than just music. Like you have movie references
Oh
like at the
God,
top,
totally.
right?
Yeah.
Like, and so, and I don't know that we've really spent much time on this, but it's almost like an invitation to zoom back a little bit to see like the superpower that you have is something around being able to store information and access it, and especially information that has really resonated and connected with you.
Hmm.
And I suspect that shows up in your coaching with your clients, that you can pull a conversation thread from, months back and just pull it forward and help them see something, right? And
Yep.
you and I, that's something that I find myself able to do is, you know, connect dots and pull threads from months and months ago. Um, so yeah, so I think there's something in it for you that isn't like you the way you relate it in this conversation was specific to music, but
Mm,
there's a superpower there that's
bigger.
you're walking around with this access to this database that is just awesome in the truest sense of the word, right? Like, um, so, and then to answer your question around, did I model sort of after anybody else? I think the answer is definitely no on that. I think
Mm,
that was one of the things that was actually a real struggle early in my professional career was I was not fitting in, and anytime I tried to fit in, I was not a happy camper in the way I was showing up. I was much more comfortable being different and sort of unique as compared to sort of, and these were sports coaching days early, so there's a certain persona and way you show up as a sports coach that was not comfortable for me. um, so I really, it took quite a while for me to find my way and find a comfort in just like, I felt there was always resistance to that, to not showing up the same way everybody else was. And
mm.
so, I think I mentioned this even last week or this week, perhaps on our community coaching call, is like, I tried to run for the board of directors for our coaching association a number of times, and I never got on. And I my sense was I was just too, I had different interests, I had different priorities. I was seeing what we needed to do for coaching in a very different way than the people that were controlling the coaching association. And so for me, it was really about, okay, so how do I just express myself in the way that feels natural for me? And I learned from other coaches. So it wasn't that I didn't look for mentorship and look for other people, but I kind of looked at how to integrate some of what I saw into my way of being,
Wow.
which again explains why that's how I coach today, is like that's how I coach other people, is the way I kind of developed my own talent.
Oh, wow. That is really neat. I mean, like that, it sounds like what you were able to do from a very young age is kind of not get pushed off a place of center that really mattered to you.
Yeah, and it's funny because even to this day, with some of the things that I've got going on right now, that's that truth is still sort of consternation from family,
Hmm.
parents around, why are you doing this? Like, why are you making these choices? It just doesn't feel like the smart thing to do or the right time to do this, or, like there's a lot of confusion around why you would live your life in that way of sort of self creation, kind of
Mm,
always being comfortable in that. And I can't explain where it came from. I just know that it's the anytime I wasn't doing that, I could feel that I was fighting against something. Like I could actually feel, and it would affect my well-being and my behavior anytime I tried to be somebody other than my natural self.
so,
And so
yeah.
I just some I didn't have enough people convincing me otherwise to push through, to do what most people do, which is to kind of push through, even though you feel that way.
Yeah.
People live their
Push
life
it
that way.
down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I was just like, screw that. Like, I'm going to do this my way. And so, yeah, maybe there's some Frank Sinatra in me somewhere.
Maybe. Well, and I think so. I feel like what we've been talking about, I had a couple of topics, and this, what we have already been talking about, it feels like to me can be summed up in these, like the impetus for me wanting to even bring you on the show was because sometimes you will say, if enough of us do this, we will be unstoppable.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, I love that. It's like, come along on this really fun journey. You don't do it alone. We do it together. And you know, I think for me, one really valuable way of thinking about that is, uh, or one thing that it's helped me understand. Like, I think I used to be a lot more caught up in like the news stories of the day, or the sort of, you get on Instagram or something and you just see all these amazing things that everybody else was doing, and you'd feel like such a little tiny speck of something, right? And the encouragement has always been, or the invitation I think has always been from you to tune out that noise, and really, like, the empowerment comes from being in your community, which doesn't have to be millions of people or something like that. It's much better if it's a much smaller number, that it feels manageable, as a fun community where you get to be loved and seen for who you are. Like, if enough people do that, we will be unstoppable.
Hmm.
That's where that comes up for me. I don't know what your thoughts are about that, but that's,
Yeah, well, it's certainly a belief that I have, and I think it extends, even it extends to your example, but and it extends to sort of even a global example of, you only need to look at the way our society has been structured to see that most of it is about control and influence over the masses.
mm,
The media channels, even the social channels, it's all to get people to behave a certain way, and the way, the way that algorithms work, the way systems work, it's all about influencing behavior. And
mm,
that only works if people are of the belief that they are reliant on other people's direction or influence in order to make a decision for themselves. And my belief is, if we can eliminate all the middle people from that,
yeah,
and if we can help people realize that they can make decisions based on their own well-being and their own inner sense of what's right for them, you disarm all of those influences, very quickly.
yeah,
And we've seen this in some ways in business. We see this, like, what people are trying to do with cryptocurrency and all these other tools is, how do we eliminate the people in the middle that are really just gatekeepers and influencers and money takers.
mm,
If we can just allow the human to interact with another human without influence of others, and do so in a way that feels right for them, um, it's hard to imagine that we're going to be in a worse place than where we are right now.
yeah. I mean, I think
Right?
it can only be better. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, they'll still be bad players, but to not have the ability to influence masses of people the way
yeah,
they can now, I don't think they're gonna be able to carry a lot of strength. So that's what I mean by that, is like, it's like self-empowerment
yeah,
to make choices without needing the influence of others. Um, to me, is like the greatest superpower, because you go through life. You and I could walk down the street, and have the exact same experience, the exact same life happening around us, and we could choose to have a very different experience of that.
yeah,
We could get caught up in it. We could just enjoy watching it all unfold. We could, try to do something positive when we see an opportunity. We could just walk by it and leave it alone. Like, it's so in our capacity to decide to create whatever experience we want. And most people just don't have the tools to know how to get to that point.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And there are, I think, to your point, there are folks with agendas. Like, I think, well, I guess my thinking is that when I have an agenda, right? When I am, I don't know, when I'm not being objective with a family member and I feel like I know what's right for them, that is me having an agenda, if that makes any sense.
mhm.
And I'm not the non-objectivity of it. The like for me, this is really relating back to just what you were saying. When we can just feel free to just be ourselves without any reason, without any sort of push one way or another from from someone else and their agenda. It's so much like that's where the really the fun begins, and it's where there's so much connection where we can really feel safe with others and they can feel safe with us, and it's just a lot of fun.
Mm. It's a process to get to that, like, and especially when you're in relationship and or you have existing relationships, because we all kind of grow up in relationships that develop a certain amount of dependency on each other.
Mm,
And some people are more dependent on others than others are. Right. And so this independence of thought and of feeling and of choice can be challenging for people who've got a certain amount of dependence on other people, right?
mm,
And so that's where we have to give people really a lot of space to find their own path to understanding this stuff, or even choosing whether to integrate it into their own lives. Is you know Relationships with other humans are complicated things, and I think as we evolve, other people get challenged by that because it's changing the way we're showing up for them.
yeah,
And the way we were showing up for them in the past created a sense of security and certainty that now we're disrupting,
yeah, yeah,
right? And so, yeah, like I find that the whole relationship piece around this is a really interesting topic, and around how, whether it's couples or families or workplaces can kind of evolve, just by kind of understanding how people are changing and understanding sort of a foundation of sort of the source code or the operating system that's at play there.
yeah,
And even if they're not in the same place, that they have an understanding of why other people are behaving the way they are. I think that's super fascinating.
yeah, yeah. I think about the idea that like, well, another topic that really came up for me was that you have this wonderful concept of selfishness, because I can be in a couple of different energies, right? If I am there, I think folks, the way that sometimes service or serving others or supporting others gets interpreted is dangerous for both the person we're trying to support and for us. Because what we're doing, and I've totally done this. Like my kids have, I've given them the concept of dashboard indicator lights. And one of the biggest ones is when I am telling them what to do, they now understand and this has come back to me in a really beautiful way. Like they'll say, "Are you okay? Because you're telling me what to do. You're giving me advice right now." And that, like rather than them being like, "Mom, quit it." Like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't get to tell me what to do. They can reflect that back to me, and I can say, "Oh, you know what? Thank you, because I'm not all right, and I'm going to go sort that out for myself."
Beautiful.
Right. And,
So,
and,
but you've had to invite them into
oh,
your journey to get to that point where they can be those reflectors for you.
100%, because
Mm.
I think, well, the way that I think of it is I used to come from the other, what I thought was serving them, which was to say, I know what you need. It's this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit more about like selfishness?
Yeah. well, the way I heard it said once was that it's funny that taking care of ourselves and our own well-being first um, is seen as selfish, when the person actually judging us as selfish is really saying, I would rather you take care of me before you take care of yourself. And which one is more selfish?
Mm,
I need you to take care of me before you take care of yourself, or
yeah,
you just
right.
go take care of your own business and I'll take care of my business. Like,
Yeah.
and so again, like this question around dependency on others is like, that's a really dangerous path to go down. And it's really interesting because I work with a lot of nonprofits and social entrepreneurs and people in that space who are very empathetic givers by nature. It's what draws them to the work. And they really have a hard time with this idea of taking care of self before taking care of all the others, because it's like the opposite of what drew them to the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
But they get to a point where they can't even function and they're making terrible decisions, and their physical well-being and their mental well-being is compromised in service of other people.
Yep.
But those other people are not asking for them to sacrifice themselves to help them.
No, right? They feel worse.
They absolutely feel worse if they knew the pain and the despair that people are going through in service of them. They would say, "Go away. We don't
Please
want."
support. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Like, I think about the idea of accepting support too. Like that's been such an interesting journey for myself, but then to help other people with, or observe, simply observe what's going on. Like, people in such pain, physical, mental pain, who are still like, no, 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 I'm leaving everything in the road for you.
mhm.
And I mean, I I live with a tendon condition because I did that. Like, I put myself so far down on the list, um, that I really pretty dangerously compromised my body. And it's what's been really fun about that is the journey back to wellness and well-being has been to put myself first,
Mhm.
to be truly selfish in that way.
You've also allowed other people around you to be selfish by asking them what they needed to 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 show up in a way that could be supportive of what you were doing,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is allowing them to be selfish, is allowing you to understand what they need first to be okay so that you
Yes.
can be okay.
So that is such I think, can we spend a couple minutes there? Like, I think it would be really, I don't know if I've shared about this on my show yet, and I think it might be useful for people to kind of understand the mechanism, right? And I do have permission from one of my kids to talk about how this has shown up for them. So, um, when I was uh, training for my hike across England, um, there were a lot of stories that came up for me that then had to be worked through, because if they weren't, I wouldn't have been able to do the trip, and I really, really, really wanted the trip. And part of that was uh showing emotion. Like I live with three men, and my our kids are now young men, and they would be really uncomfortable with the amount of emotion that I sometimes would be exhibiting, right? They would want to take care of me, they would want to fix it, they would want to not be in the presence of it. Like, they just, they would be like, what the hell is going on? And one day I, asked all of them, each of them, a version of this question, which is, what do you need to support me in fully expressing my emotions? Which is something I think that a lot of people, especially around their kids and their spouses, really don't want to do, because they don't want to make them feel burdened, or like, anyway. And the responses I got from my family were amazing, and produced not just like, it showed me how I could support them. It showed me what they needed. And our oldest son Max is 22. He works in an emergency room. He's an EMT. His whole life is invested in caring for others. And his concern was that he would see me in distress and think, oh my God, my mother's in distress. Like, I need to help her. And so he asked, when I said, what do you need to support me in fully expressing my emotions? He asked for a simple thumbs up. Like he said, can I hold my thumb up and you hold yours back? And that's how I'll know you're okay. And I was like, absolutely. That's amazing. Like, thank you for such a simple mechanism. You know?
It's beautiful. And it's kind of the example of how you can be selfish in service of other people is to empower them to have what they need.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of just demanding what you need, which is, you know, I think people think that's being demanding what you need from other people is a poor form of selfishness.
Yeah.
It's understanding what you need, putting your priorities first, showing up for yourself first, and understanding what other people need who are going to be interacting with us or influenced by how we're showing up. Same thing, like with my upcoming trip, it's understanding what people need to feel comfortable that, I'm safe, or I'm, whatever, right? Whatever their concerns are, they can relay that a lot better than I could ever guess on their behalf.
Yeah.
So I've stopped trying to guess what other people need, and I hear what other people need to feel comfortable, and I can do the best I can to provide that. And I think, Max, that's such a beautiful example of how you can be true to yourself and be selfish and, provide the support that he needs to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We both got exactly what we needed.
It's the way it should be,
Yeah.
it would seem.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree. Yeah, let's talk about your trip. What are you doing for the next year, my friend?
Mm. Well, yeah, I'm taking a year, I guess, personal sabbatical to go sail around the world as part of a race called the Clipper Around the World Race. So yeah, we're setting sail from southern England at the start of September, and we'll be 11 months at sea, 42,000 miles, 6 continents, all the oceans. So yeah, sort of a trip of a lifetime that's sort of part of my upbringing in my family. We were sailors, and I read books about sailing and was inspired by people that did these kinds of things. And in whatever way the universe aligned, that this would be a good time in my life to be able to do that. And so getting ready, I have just 3 weeks until I leave for England for final prep, and I'll be back a year later, hopefully in good health, and hopefully having, I'm sure, having had an amazing life experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious. Okay, so months ago in our coaching community, in one of the meetups, we got to talking about the fears that people have, the fears that we ourselves have. And you said, fear creates my to-do list. And I have been so fascinated with that idea because I see where in me fear creates my to-do list. Like I understand how that can relate to so many things in myself, but I was curious if that ever, like, was it just something that you sort of like jokingly said, or is it really like how you kind of set your sails? Like,
Yeah, it's funny, I don't remember saying that, but I'm sure it sounds like something I probably said. But it's not like I go looking for cliffs to jump off of or anything like that. I mean, some might argue that sailing around the world is that. What I think it is for me is, and I think you and I did talk about this. Like, I got asked, I think yesterday, somebody asked me, like, how do you know you can do this?
mm,
And I said, I don't know if I can do this, but that's why I'm doing it. And that was a really confounding answer for them. It's like not knowing perhaps is the fear that I was referring to when I said those words. It's the not knowing whether I can do something that draws me to it to go and find out.
Mm.
Because I love the journey of finding out. And so far in life, I've been able to pick myself up when I've screwed up and made mistakes, and life has continued on, and I found a way to get back on track. And so I kind of trust that I trust myself that in the process of figuring out if I can do something, there'll be some trips, there'll be some falls, there'll be some mistakes, but I'm going to be able to get back up and keep going. And to know at the end of it, oh, turns out I can sail around the world. Like that would be pretty cool. And
Yeah.
if I can't, if something happens that gives me a different answer, I'll at least have some new information on why it is that the answer
Yeah.
was not yet, right? But
Yeah.
too many of us sit back and just ask the question of like, if you don't know if you can do it, like, how do I, what should I do?
Yeah.
It's just like, get the hell out there and go and find
Try
out.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
go on it, whatever it is. I mean, I have so many of these conversations with university students who, as part of my coaching practice. And boy, all the fear and all the, like, how do I have a conversation with a senior person in a company? How do I do a cold call of it by email? Like, go and find out, go and, yeah,
Yep.
do some research if you want, but you've got to, the experience is the best teacher. And so you got to get out there and do it your way. And it's probably why I really spend a lot of time getting people to tap into their own intuition on things, because I think once they begin to trust that, it's a source of the answer to those questions. It's always the source of the answer to those questions. Is what's the
Yeah.
best way for me to do this? Well, go get quiet, go for a walk, go do something that relaxes you, and then ask yourself that question, and you're going to get some pretty good advice from yourself.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
go do it.
And then go try it. Right. Yeah. And those are the sorts of fears that come up in me, like, you know, wanting to talk to someone and being like, oh, you can't write to them. And I'll be like, well, wait a second. If fear was going to create my to-do list, maybe I could talk to them. And some of the conversations that I've had have been like a direct result of that thought process. And they've been some of the most beautiful, most funnest, and it means I get to talk to whoever I want, and people are amazing everywhere. So that's really fun too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the whole word fear is so over dramatized, right? I mean, there's a fun little a book out there called Obstacle is the Way, which if you
Mm,
just go to the bookstore and read the title and just sort of embed that into your understanding, that the things that feel like obstacles, the things that feel like that there's resistance, you have resistance about, are things worth exploring, because there's something in that to be learned.
yeah.
There's something in that that's getting in the way of you just sort of fully and freely expressing yourself. And so I love feeling resistance, seeing something as an obstacle, feeling fear, only because it's helping me uncover where there's still, whether it's insecurities or stories or resistance, that once I eliminate that or understand its source, life just gets a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel any, I don't know, the word that just came into my head was like pressures. And I suppose that maybe that references back to the conversation about like pressures from other people or, um, yeah, I don't even know where I'm going with that. But if I say to you, uh, what does pressure mean to you?
Yeah, I understood the question as soon as you asked it. I think pressure is sort of the gap between what we would choose to do for for our inner sort of well-being,
Mm.
and what we perceive other people, and that might be one person or a group of people, need from us.
Mm.
And when there's a gap there, I think we feel pressure, which pressure to me is like, it's almost like us being pulled away from ourselves. Even though pressure feels like it's coming at us, I think what it really is like a pull to be out of alignment with ourselves
Mm.
in order for other people to feel a certain way, feel better, to do, and sometimes it's of our own making, because we're feeling the pressure to show up in a certain way, because that's sort of the expectation that we understand of society or of family or of whoever. But even in that case, it's still a sense of having to get out of alignment in order to be somebody for the benefit of other people.
Yeah.
Um, and sure, I find myself, I notice that when it shows up, and I think I'm pretty tuned into when I'm feeling that. And to be honest, like right now in my life, there's a fair amount of that going on around me, because my trip is uncovering um, a reliance on me in other people,
Mm.
um, in new ways, because I'm not just going away for the weekend. I'm going away for like 5 weeks at a time, or a year between times people are going to see me. And so the reality of that, as time gets closer and closer to me leaving, is creating pressures, because it's uncovering stuff in relationships and with other people. So I'm having to try to stay in sort of the best state I can to have those conversations, which is not to get caught up in the pressure,
Mm.
but to try to understand its source, and to try to understand what other people need from me to feel that they can let go of that concern or that worry or whatever's the source of that pressure. So yeah, I mean, I'm a human being like everybody else, and there's all this stuff going on around me. I think what I've learned how to do well is to not get caught up in other people's energy,
Mm.
and then to just be able to kind of like work through stuff from a very calm and peaceful place. Even if the conversations are energized conversations, I have ability to stay out of that energy and to just try to work through it. So yeah, it's ongoing, as life is, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, it feels like, for me, it feels a lot smoother road than when I was young, and when some of these things would have really thrown me off. I think understanding how to tap into my own well-being as the priority, and then recognize when I'm being pulled into other people's energy, and not allowing that to be sort of the reality. As
Yeah.
you and I have talked about, staying out of other people's business
Yeah.
is, it's not just literally staying out of, telling them what to do, but it's also staying out of their energy around what their business is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we're close to family, when we have loved ones that are struggling, whatever it might be, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
But we can actually be our most helpful self when we can show up in a calm and peaceful way around whatever they're
Yeah.
going through.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because that I felt as I got closer and closer to my trip, as there were shorter and shorter amounts of hours and days until I was getting on the plane, the pressure really, really amped up. I felt it.
I
You know,
remember.
yeah, I'm sure you do. And what was really interesting was to hear from them when I got home what it was like to be around me before I left. And because from the inside, it felt a little bit like a rocket. You know how a rocket has to be ignited on the ground before it can go off. And so that's really how, as the buildup was happening for my trip, that was really how it felt from the inside. And from the outside, it was like, well, what's been reflected back to me is that that was a bit of the feeling from them, but in a really, I don't know, in an interesting way, I guess. Like they just they were like, we we can't wait until she gets on the plane.
Yeah,
She
yeah,
needs
yeah,
this
yeah.
energy needs to be
Oh,
dispersed. So
yeah. I'm sure when they, pre-ignite the rocket, people are told to stay away,
yeah,
stay at a distance for a reason, right? So you should have posted the signs up. Keep your
yeah.
distance.
Keep your distance.
I'm going
Exactly.
through something here.
Yeah.
I just need some space. Yeah.
And that's it's so interesting too, because there were, one loved one in particular, when I left, when I got on the plane, they had two out of the four things that they had shared that they needed in order for them to feel okay and support me in doing this trip. And it was really interesting because I had to leave that behind. I had to just not worry about what was happening for them and
Mm.
really, sort of tune into myself. So those signs would have been even more useful, it feels. So what is the feeling for you? Like, do you feel like a rocket that's been ignited and is ready to go off? Like, or yeah, what's the feeling inside of you about your upcoming year?
Yeah, it's funny. No, I think the rockets are all around me. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to navigate through them all. I can honestly say like I'm anxious to go. Um, um, but I'm respecting the fact that, there are, I want, I want to leave knowing um, that I've at least responded to what other people's needs are in the best way I can right now to allow them to enjoy the year
Mm,
that they're going to have, which will be a different year than they've had when I've been around. And
mm,
so um, those are the conversations that are ongoing: is how to embrace having something that's unique and different, um, even if it feels scary and unknown and all that, is to embrace what it can be. So yeah, I mean, I could hop on the boat today. I could personally hop on the boat today and be ready to go, but I'm also trying to be of service to other people in a way that doesn't take me out of sort of the state that I'm in right now. And it's just
mm.
balancing that has been it's been a really interesting last couple months as the time has started to get right on top of us to see, okay, there's definitely a lot more conversation, a lot more sharing of how people are feeling and what people are noticing about the reality of us, of me being away for a year. So, I mean, even some of my coaching clients, it's like, you know, learning that to be self-reliant is ultimately what, as a coach, my objective is with every client is that, whether, and I hear from some of my university students that, they'll send me a note and say, oh, I was in the middle of a situation and, your voice came in my head and helped me sort through something. And I think that's beautiful because they're still sorting it out,
Yeah.
right? They're still on their own journey. And if I can be of service in that way, that's great. If somebody feels like they're not going to be able to move ahead without being able to be on a phone call or a Zoom call with me, um, then I think those are the relationships that I still feel I'd like to move forward before I depart.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And something that was really helpful for me a couple of weeks ago was the day that you invited me to think of a question for our next conversation. And every question that I would have asked, I realized I did get to one that was empowering rather than what the questions had been prior, but every single one of those questions was like, "Oh, I know how to do this. I have a tool for that. I know how to do." Like, so it's all what's been really fun about this is to have all of that and know that it's inside me. Like whatever I encounter, I'm going to be able to handle because it's in me now.
It always was. We were just had to dig through some of the stuff that was in the way,
The things to yeah.
do a little cleanup. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, sort of find. I mean, really, brush all the dust off or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, look, and I know this isn't about a conversation about your journey, but it has been fun to see that evolution that, of even during the trip, of just getting through the days and getting through the next day, right? To the point now where, yeah, I barely hear from you anymore, Kay. Like, and I feel proud of that. I feel proud that that journey of getting yourself on that plane to go to England, getting through the days where, 5 or 7 miles seemed insurmountable, to, hey, I did 15.9 miles today, right? And I'm going tomorrow, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, like you cannot come back from something like that and not have a different sense of yourself, right? And of
Yeah.
what's possible. And so it's been, yeah, it's like I said, those are the that part of what coaching is, to see that evolution and to see their sort of the next level that people start to operate at, it's thrilling to be part of.
Wow. Well, thank you. For me too. And for the people that I work with, because I'm noticing this kind of same thing happening. There's this real growth. And
Mhm.
you have said, like, I came back, you know, a different person, and that's what kind of prompted this thought in my mind. But you've talked a lot about how you have no idea what's ahead of you for when you come back. And I think a lot of people would be like, "Oh my God, like what?" Can you share a little bit more about that, just as we're wrapping up?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a conversation around my house that's a little disconcerting, for because, and I mean it mainly predominantly around my professional activities.
Hmm.
And I remember I was out for a walk one morning, probably 6 or 7 months ago, and this sort of thought came to me that this is going to be like an awesome experience, and it's going to test me in ways that I've never been tested before. Um, the people I'm going to spend time with, the places we're going to go, the realization of self that is going to emerge. It's like you've got to respect that to the point where you can't answer the question of what are you going to do when you're done, because you don't know what the impact of that's going to be
Hmm.
until you've actually had the experience. And to try to say I know what I'm going to do when I get back would and then to go and have that experience, there would be like opposing forces at play. Like there would be one that's saying, here, Andrew, you're exposing yourself. Here's more about yourself you didn't know, right? Here's more for you to be aware of. Here's more for you to be curious about and inspired by. And then to try to bottle that up and say, oh, no, 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 I'm going to go do this when I'm done. Like it would be so, it felt so wrong when I was having this conversation with myself. Um, I just thought, well, I've got to just let go of all that. I've
Hmm.
just got to go and embrace that whatever this turns out to be is going to give me the guidance and the inspiration to know what comes next.
Yeah.
And and so and I'm not saying like, when I share this with other people, like I often get something, well, that's, it's nice to be able to do that at this, stage of your life. And, it's nice to have a full bank account. And those are not realities for me. Like
Hmm.
I'm going to work for another long time because I love to, to do what express myself and do things that help and create value for other people. And I don't have a bank account full of money that makes this sort of inconsequential.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's it's a trusting the message that I really offer to other people, which is to go with what is your true aligned inner self message, and to go with that. And if you go with that in the direction that it leads you, um, it to me it's impossible to go astray. You
Yeah.
may bump into some rocks along the way, but you're going the direction that the river's flowing. And that's what I want to be part of. I want to go in the direction the river's flowing and then figure out what's at the other end as I do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I honestly think, and I kind of step back and think about, does it require a year-long sailing trip to adopt this mindset. And, I'm realizing that actually, no, like you don't have to walk across England or sail around the world. You can just choose that for the next period of time, as you experiment with life, you're going to allow inspiration to guide you, and you're going to kind of embrace. And for a student, let's say just graduating university to start their career, I'll often say to them, take a couple of years, right? Go and try a bunch of things.
Mm.
Go and apply for all kinds of different jobs, or travel, or do something that gives you input. It creates opportunities for inspiration to emerge. Those will be obvious when they show up, the ones that are meant for you.
Yep.
And that's hard for people, because people are sort of bought into this. There's a step-by-step strategic way to do everything that, I just think if you look around at society today, there's enough evidence that has not worked.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
enough like unhappy people on the streetcar going into downtown Toronto this morning to do things they don't enjoy doing.
Yep.
And it's not everybody should be an entrepreneur, everybody should do this, but everybody should at least take some time to find the things that inspire them and choose to do as much of that as they can.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you just never know what that will look like. And if we do, like I was just envisioning as you were talking, those folks taking the transportation out into the center of Toronto, they're doing that maybe because it's quote in service of others. Like maybe what they're doing is working to support in a way that, right. And if it doesn't feel aligned, it's tough.
Yeah. And it's not always about people quitting their jobs and going,
no,
to do something else. It's sometimes it's just about having a different relationship with the work that you do, right? Or understanding that, as you said, the reason I do my job from 9 to 5 is to generate the income that helps support my family. And, from 6 p.m. till the next morning or on every weekend, we do things that really fulfill us. We find passion and we find purpose in that. And so it's not about that. It's just about actually reflecting and giving yourself permission to notice where the inspiration and where the passions are. And so all I'm doing is taking a year to say, I'm going to take a year to see what comes next for me.
Yeah.
And I just happen to have an experience that's going to give me a lot of time to reflect and notice and become more self-aware. But I think people could take that for themselves. And if it's a year, or if it's to take the next 3 months and just, go for a walk every day and just, no earbuds on, and just see what conversations you start having with yourself about where you're at in life and what's going on with your career and family and relationships, you'll find great answers.
What's interesting too is that you just for yourself, or that in that conversation that you had with yourself 6 or 7 months ago, you did the exact thing that we started out talking about, which is that, when you would say that like you never wanted to, you were always able to say, well, nope, that's just not me. Like I want to do what's me.
Yeah. Yeah. And because, and I remember in that conversation, back to the word pressure, there was a sense of pressure I was feeling from external relationships I have, business relationships, about whether I was going to continue on. Was I going to continue on with the university? Was I going to continue on with these other clients? And I was just noticing that, going, like, do I want to feel that for a year? And is that really going to support and align with the way I want to show up on the boat? And the answer was no.
Yeah.
Right? The answer was, I want to make it very clear that those loops are closed, and my answer is going to only emerge a year from now at best.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there'll probably be time afterwards that you'll need to I have really, I mean, I can look back and say I've enjoyed the process. It's been such an interesting and disorienting return from England, and but coming through that has, I feel so great. Like
Yeah.
I'm so excited about that for you, like what that will be like, you know?
Hmm. It's funny. I had a conversation with a fellow coach yesterday about this topic, and we were talking about transformational coaching, and that, and the question was sort of, what do you do when somebody's had like this transformational experience, coaching experience with you, like, and they figured it out, right? It's like they see where, where their understanding of their own experience was offline, and now they're online, and right, they get it. And I said, well, that's the easy part. It's the integration that's the hard part. It's the integration where we now run up this new reality against a world that hasn't really changed as much as we have, and we get all of this conflicting feedback and confusing reactions from, people and society and everything else, and that's the work.
Yeah.
Supporting people through integration is as important as creating the transformation in the first place,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Because, you know having a conversation which creates a new insight is powerful for sure, but seeing that new insight or that new transformation expressed consistently in one's life when it interacts with other human beings, that takes some time, and that having somebody to support you on that is really, really powerful. And
yeah.
so I suspect, as it's been for you coming back from England, and it's like, okay, and people have, I think, use the words like you're a different person, or you're not the same, or
Yeah.
right, like,
Yeah.
I'm expecting I'm going to have a period like that coming back, getting my sea legs, getting my legs on land back, but also getting my bearings on, oh yeah, this is like life on a boat is pretty simple. Like, you don't have to make many decisions every day, and like it's all routine. And then you come back to this like noisy, busy life. It's just like, oh, people around me are convinced I'm just going to want to keep sailing forever, but I don't know. You
Mm,
know, I don't know. Maybe I'll look forward to coming back and having like a simpler, less, chaotic life. I don't know. I don't even know what chaos will feel like after
yeah.
a year on a boat versus a year in a city. Like, as you know, I even spent a winter in Costa Rica, where it's very slow, very calm, very easy to kind of just get into this very peaceful state. You come out of Costa Rica back to a big city, and it's jarring, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's going to be adaptation, as there has been for you, from, when I'm done, and I'll need support on that, I'm sure. Um, but I'm excited to find out what it's all going to be like. That's the bottom line.
Oh man. Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
feel that. I feel that excitement. Well, any final thoughts as you know, as we're finishing up?
Hmm. Well, I know that, like, I hope. Well, first of all, I hope that our conversation is of some value for other people who are listening to it. Yeah, I would honestly just want to reflect back that, what a joy it's been to be part of your path and your journey. And as a coach, I remember when I was coaching athletes, like, I would I would really get drawn to coaching the kids who were like the most enthusiastic about being coached, about
Mm,
receiving
mm,
coaching, right? It didn't matter whether they were like at the bottom of the barrel natural talent wise, or at the top of the barrel. It didn't matter. It was like, let me find those kids that just want to be a sponge and are excited to show up and learn something new and try something new. And that's been my experience, being part of your journey. And so really, my final words would be thank you for that, because it's been an awesome experience, and thrilled to see the path that you're on.
Thank you so much. Wow. Well, I mean, so reflecting back to you, right? Like the feeling of like, here's someone who gets that in me, and there can be these messages from our world that are like, you shouldn't do this. You're too much. You're this is wrong for you, like why do you want to do that? Those sorts of things. And to have to be in a community, but also to be to be the client of someone who just, I don't know, is supportive in that way has really, really been special. And it's been fun to see um, what's happened, I guess.
Mm.
And it's been really fun because you're that kind of person too, I think. And it's been really fun to see you being fully yourself and fully present. Um, yeah, it's just, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, you can find Andrew Moss at coachandrewmoss.com. We were just talking about soon there's going to be a, 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 an I'm off sailing kind of thing up there. And, I would strongly advise, uh, I would very much invite you to get in touch with Andrew because, he's a lot of fun. And if you want to hear, this is the other thing I wanted to mention. We had a prior conversation, and what was really interesting and fun about that was you, Andrew, shared a lot about some of the challenges of going from being, from coaching Olympic athletes and sort of being in I think you might have even called it like an ego type space where you were really
Mhm.
caught up in how you ought to be serving others, maybe, I don't know. And so to hear you describe like how you went from that to really being more in alignment with yourself and your values about where you took your coaching business, that might be, and you're a little bit about relationships too, because that was about like one of the question you were asked, right, was how do you want your kids to remember you? Like, and anyway, I would invite anyone listening to go back and give that a listen as well. It's really kind of a fun and interesting also conversation with you. So I like to end every show with a huge thank you to our producer, the man who, oh my gosh, this is so much fun to be partners with. And I'm really, really lucky. He is not just our sound engineer and the kind of guidance that I enjoy so much about podcasting. He is also the 26th time winner of the Husband of the Year award, Benjamin Kolp. Thank you so much.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right? 26 years and he's won that every year. So thank you so much, my Ben, for doing all that you do for us, for me, and for yourself. Yeah, and thank you so much for listening and for tuning into this conversation. We will see you next time.